This week on the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast, we talk more about The Mandalorian and the expectations for the series that launches on November 12th. What does it all mean to Disney, to Star Wars? Is this the biggest release of the year for the Star Wars franchise, more so than Rise of Skywalker? Could it mean more for The Mandalorian? Plus, we'll talk more about Disney Plus and what the overall service is going to bring to the table, what else we expect, and how things will go forward for the new streaming service for the Mouse House. And of course, we're going to get out our pocketbooks, talk a little bit about how much we spend on some of our favorite Star Wars items. All that and much more on the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. Welcome back to the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. Alongside Chris and Sam, I am Mike. Without Ryan this week, we've lost Ryan to what I imagine is a 20 to 40 hour gameplay session of KOTOR, right? He's finally gone back.
Yep,
and
he's back in the fold.
Delved in, and he can't walk away from his game.
He's in the Sarlacc pit.
And it's a part of the game that you just really don't restart. You keep on trying to get out of the pit. If you have to restart, then you're not much of a gamer.
Right, exactly.
Guys, not a lot of news to talk about in this edition of the pod, but I feel like, it's been a little while since we've had a chance to delve into some of the upcoming aspects of the Star Wars Galactic Cinematic Television streaming universe. We have to get into all of that. Before we do, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, DroidsPod on Twitter, DroidsPod on Instagram, and of course the Droids Podcast on Facebook, Gmail, droidspod@gmail.com, and of course rate and review us on iTunes. Let us know what you think. There's a lot on the horizon. We've talked about it this year. It's probably one of the biggest years in the history of Star Wars fandom, of Star Wars storytelling, and let's just get straight to it. The Mandalorian comes out on November 12th, and I think the thing that we've talked about our expectations for the series, what we want to see from the storytelling, how excited we are about what Jon Favreau has put together with a great list of directors, a wonderful cast, what seems like a fantastic first foray into a episodic series that's no longer television, that's streaming for Star Wars, which we've been wanting in a live-action form for as far back as we all can remember. But the thing I think we should talk about is what is at stake with The Mandalorian when it launches on November 12th? There have been recent estimates that the budget for each episode is around $15 million, which means you're talking about, 120 plus million for the entire run of the first season, which is, obviously close to a cinematic budget. But that $15 million, as we've talked about in the past, is comparable to what we've seen for Game of Thrones, which I think was $10 million per episode until the last season, when it ballooned a little bit higher. What I take away from all of this is the expectation on this show for Disney and from the larger pop culture consensus reaction to what this should be is this needs to be not only a hit, but a smash hit that crosses across genres of demographics, that you get so many people bought in because you need this service to launch with a bang. And it not only needs to be good for the service, but it has to somehow create a cultural footprint like Game of Thrones would be the expectation that Disney is having with the amount they are spending on this. Do you agree with that assessment, or am I going a little too far that Disney would have that high an expectation?
Well, Mike, I like the expectation. I do agree. I do think with competition of TV streaming services and just programming in general. Now Apple's got their own thing. They've got all the big dogs out with Spielberg and Oprah and everybody. I think that they're looking to have this kind of cultural impact again, the same way Star Wars had a cultural impact in movies. I mean, I think here's an opportunity for Disney plus Lucasfilm to do this in television. At $15 million an episode, obviously goes to without saying they're not sparing any expense. I mean, if that is equated to epicness and quality, that's yet to be seen. But I mean, I feel like they've got a solid cast of directors, and I mean, it seems like they're doing everything right at this point.
Can I ask? I forget if this is something that's been revealed yet. If we know it, if we don't, are they dropping all episodes at once, or will it be a weekly release?
It is, I believe, a weekly release. I recall that from a few months ago that it was a piece of news that they are going to let this play out and have a little bit of time for people to stew over it rather than every episode. And I think the reason I remember that most is because I thought, oh man, I can't watch 8 episodes in a row for us to do an entire podcast about the whole season the next day like we probably would have wanted to. So I believe that is spread out over the course of several weeks.
I'm recalling that too, so I think we're going to say two people thinking it is basically confirmed, but with vague memories. But, I think that aids sort of this expectation. I mean, I think a big factor that there's something kind of unusual in today's TV era that Game of Thrones achieved, which was that idea of event television. I know I've talked about it on here before, and Chris, how you inspired, you love it, and how you inspired and engendered in me a love of event television. And I think like what's interesting is that I would guess that a huge portion, if not a majority, of Game of Thrones fans consumed that show via streaming, via like the HBO Now or HBO Go apps.
However, or via BitTorrent when it first started.
But it was still appointment television because you could only get it on Sundays, and spoilers were so rampant. And I think by sort of feeding us the Mandalorian in a drip format, there's the chance that it could become a show that's that big or close to that big. As opposed to something like another super popular show right now is something like a Stranger Things, where they drop a new season, as is the model on, from Netflix. And I think it's like, it gets a lot of interest and a lot of buzz, but it's over a shorter span. It doesn't serve quite as well over the long term, multiple seasons.
Sure.
The other thing, though, that's, I think, really worth evaluating is, like, we are at a very, very different point in Star Wars now than we were in, let's say, August of 2015.
Yep. Yeah.
And so a big thing that, like, one of the advantages that Game of Thrones had was that it was not, like, there weren't clear expectations initially, and so it held a lot of surprise, and like built that group organically. And I think right now the interesting thing is that like Star Wars fandom is definitely divided, and I think like I would worry a little bit that like are there enough people who aren't going to give this a shot? I mean, I think pretty much all the diehard fans will, but will it go mainstream? I don't know.
Yeah, I think there is something to kind of its release schedule, and then I was just thinking as you were speaking, Sam, I was like, well, it seems kind of antiquated to release it week by week, but you said it does kind of create this like event television or this like event moment. Like you can only get it on one day. It is a rallying point for all the marketing messaging. It's everyone focuses everything on that one day, but at the end of the season, you have it now full to stream. It's not like they don't. It's not like network television, right, where you watch reruns. So now they have this little package. So it's like your expert fans or the people like us, we're going to be watching it week to week, right? We're the people that love it. We're going to evangelize this show, and people will be like, "Well, I'll just wait till they're all out and then I'll watch it." Or we start to see the hype for season 2, so then people are now going to start watching season 1 as a recap. So they'll be like, oh, cool, I can watch this show. Season 1's already out. They start advertising a few months out. So I could see how the model is actually, I think it's a little, it's pretty modern. I guess with anything, it lets them control the pacing of the show depending on how each episode is structured. And hopefully it builds suspense, and I hope it builds that kind of buzz early on.
I guess as I'm thinking of it a lot, like as I'm really doing a 1-to-1 comparison with Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I think that cannot be the bar, and I cannot imagine a Star Wars TV show kind of hitting that.
Yeah.
Certainly not right away.
I totally agree with you, Sam, that it shouldn't be that bar, but executives in a place like Disney and shareholders have an expectation of, oh, you're going to create that next thing with your new streaming service. And this is the headlining show for that new streaming service that has a budget of that caliber of a show. I don't think it should be. It shouldn't be trying to do that. But I wonder if internally somebody's trying to check the box like, let's better do that, or we're going to have to reevaluate our Star Wars plan.
I feel like if that was the case, they probably wouldn't have named it The Mandalorian.
They would have been like, Star Wars The Adventure Continues on TV.
Yeah, exactly. The Young Adventures of Young Star Wars.
Yeah. River.
This isn't
Wars.
really. This isn't the first time that Lucasfilm has done something like this. So they did. As I made the joke, they did make the Indiana Jones series, like the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones. So I think I feel like this is just something Lucasfilm has been trying to do for a long time: is get a TV show to tell part of the story alongside the movie. I think they're keeping everything super secret, and I think it's going to be the little tie-ins to the movies that are really going to start selling this series. But I think what they need to be careful of, and sometimes I think Clone Wars, even though I haven't seen them all, is a little guilty of this, is that they cater to like their own very unique audience, whereas I feel like Clone Wars kind of kept you out of some of the things that you would like from the Star Wars movies. Like they just didn't make those connection points right away for some reason. Whereas I think The Mandalorian will probably lean in to basically the whole series. So we're talking prequels, we're talking new trilogy, old trilogy. So I think I'm curious to see if they are going to like lead those paths together. And they're kind of saying, oh, it's its own thing, it's its own thing. But I want to know, when's the guest star? When do we see a glimpse of, like, C-3PO? You know what I mean? Like, those are the moments, I think, that are going to start to sell the show as long as they use them in the right way.
See, I don't know if... I wonder... I don't know if I think that... I mean, I think it would sell the show. It would be, like, a popular thing. But I also think, like, if what they are going for is something that becomes true, like, must-watch, appointment television, then they've got to... Pedro Pascal's character has to be a very compelling, great character. We have to care about the people in the world, and we have to have some, like... We have to have a sense of, like, basically season 1 has to feel like, oh, this is only the beginning of this Mandalorian's quest, and it has to, like, kind of blow out and get bigger.
I agree. They need to establish a world too that we believe. I mean, luckily they have the back end of Star Wars to go off of. But again, like you said, story has to come first, and it has to be something that we're all behind before they could start giving us fan service.
Well, you've both talked about how if you don't hit on those elements that are core storytelling expectations from people, you may have those of us sit down, but are we also going to capture our partners, our family members who may not care as much about Star Wars, but could have their interest piqued if you have a good enough story that it's like, all right, well, the wrapping on this is Star Wars, but I'm still connecting to it based on whatever they have the Mandalorian and Pedro Pascal's character going through. Maybe he is a Han Solo type who then has to be better than you would have expected him to be, and you find a way to get people to care about that. That's what's so important.
That's a great point, Mike, and I think that's maybe what I was trying to say when I was talking about Clone Wars or even Resistance or Rebels.
You can't ostracize
on
anybody.
its own. It's a great show, and shout out to Resistance, just got nominated for an Emmy. But you're right, though. If you're not a fan of Star Wars, you're not going to watch that show. Like unless you're a kid looking for a cartoon, which is kind of what I do, but you're not going to just randomly say like, oh, I'll try this. Like, it's Star Wars, that's why you're trying it. And then therefore your audience gets smaller. But you're right. Maybe that's why they don't have the word Star Wars in the title.
That is the challenge, right? Because just to continue the Game of Thrones logic, it's like with Game of Thrones, if somebody was like, oh, I don't like fantasy, or oh, I don't like Lord of the Rings, someone might say like, oh, you know what though? Game of Thrones is really, really good. I think you'll like it. You should watch it. And somebody might go, fine, I'll watch one. And then they may like it or not, right? But I think there's a willingness to try something when somebody's like, it's really amazing and it's an unknown quantity. Whereas I do think there are people out there who have made up their minds that Star Wars isn't for them. Obviously, we are in a very sort of uniform community, a very homogenous community of people who love Star Wars. But if I'm imagining, for instance, my parents, I could see my parents. I could see, me convincing my parents to watch an episode or two of Game of Thrones, whereas I could not see myself convincing either of them to watch Star Wars just because they've seen it, they think it's fine, and they also have both kind of decided over the course of their lives that it's not for them. And so it's like, it's never going to be exciting. Even if I say it's great, they're going to say, yeah, but it's Star Wars great or something.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, we all know historically that both of your parents have read all of Game of Thrones also. So it'd be a way easier sell.
What it was actually, the real story is that they read every expanded universe novel, and then they just got sick of Star Wars. So
I see. They just can't. They got too much of it. Yeah. Oh yeah. On that note, shout out to friend of the pod Tony. He lent me some of his Star Wars novels.
Are we gonna have a Star Wars Chris book report on the expanded universe every week?
I think we might. I just got to sit down and read. So
it's the new hot and fresh.
Chris doesn't read.
I'm trying. Yeah,
Tony, you lent him to the wrong person. You lent him to the wrong host.
You should have sent him to Sam.
We'll all benefit.
So I'll pose the question. We all hope this is a massive success, and regardless of whether or not it's going to hit those benchmarks that we talked about of trying to reach Game of Thrones level of interest and getting that broad audience. But if there is a consensus this underperforms, and Disney, like Netflix, will likely not release, they're going to just say, 150 million people watch this in the opening weekend. Of course, that's going to be, no one's going to be able to check that.
Right, exactly.
They'll say it's a success, but if there seems to be word that internally there are rumblings that this didn't perform, that you continue this narrative of maybe Star Wars has potentially fatigue or there is fracturing among the fan base, do you think that a underperforming Mandalorian would result in potentially not necessarily pulling back from the films that are now being talked about with Benioff and Weiss and Rian Johnson, but could the Cassian Andor series be in flux if this new Mandalorian series doesn't do that well? Because I see that as a concern that I have, that this needs to perform well. Otherwise, we might see a lot less Star Wars content on the small screen.
It is scary to think that's one of the downsides of this new Star Wars era, right? Is that there is a pressure to perform, and just like we the topic of this pod, my hope would be that Disney Plus is multifaceted and just Star Wars is one part of it, and that they have a content game plan beyond Star Wars.
Oh, they do. We've talked about the Marvel series that they have.
Yeah, exactly.
Out.
So I think they have these anchor points, and they also have the backlog of all these Disney movies, all of the Lion Kings, all of the Aladdins, and so I think what we'll see is this kind of this workhorse of a streaming service that just has all very quality, all the Pixar movies. Like, these are going to be a no-brainer for parents. Like, you want Disney movies? Yes, sign me up. I'll get all this. I could show my kids this for 2 years, right? Until they get tired of it or whatever. But hopefully they'll move on to the Marvel series. They'll move on to the Star Wars series. I hope that gives these TV series a little more creative license and it doesn't become a bottom line thing, because I think that's where a lot of the most interesting things are happening today is in television, because I think the bottom line risk is kind of like, having a $9.99 subscription fee and a commercial that's already kind of electronically scheduled is better than nothing. So if you could make a show that is remotely watchable, that's better than not having a show. And I think Star Wars is way better than not having a show. So my hope would be it doesn't control it.
I mean, I think that there's, there is going to be so much. Again, you talked about the Marvel, Disney, Pixar movies. Let's not forget the entire Fox library.
The Simpsons
is going to be, and the Simpsons are all going to be available there. So there are a number of reasons that I think with the super low cost of entry, I think they're getting in. I mean, it feels maybe a little late, but they're big enough to still do it, where it's like, this feels like they might be among the last games in town that people are willing to just like kind of blindly subscribe to and give a shot. And once you're in, you know, when you think of like the high volume of people that are going to be willing to sign up for that monthly service fee, well, then you might not worry about making the Mandalorian at a slight loss. Obviously, you wouldn't do it for a bunch of seasons, but if it's critically well received, or if it gets some recognition, or if it has a strong fan base that, you know, is made up of loyal subscribers, it might help. I mean, I also think the other thing that's good about this is like, this isn't the Star Wars streaming service. They're going about as broad as you can. It's all Disney and Fox content, basically, which, like, if you look at the streaming services that have failed, it's because they've been super narrow and too specific. You know, people don't want, like, the DC, you know, whatever it's called, DC app. It's like that one's failing because those fans are super loyal and they're all willing to pay whatever price you put in front of them. Yeah, but there aren't enough people who are like, Batman's my everything to like to make that.
Hey, Chris, I think I know one person whose everything is Batman.
I was gonna say, I know you, James Bond and Batman streaming service. Sam would
honestly, I'll tell you what,
$75 a month, he'd pay it.
I would sign up for a James Bond one in a heartbeat. Honestly, if there was
$6 a month,
like if they did spy streaming. And it was just like Mission Impossible's James Bond, like all that. Oh man, I'd be in.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think this service, you're right. It might be the kind of the last of the big streamings before we see like a change in technology or a real shift in the way content is delivered. I think Disney Plus might be a physical media killer. I think it might be similar to when we were all kind of holding out to like which streaming service is going to get the Beatles, right, for music. And once that kind of happened, it was like, all right, well, what's left? It's hard to put your eggs in any basket. And then once the Beatles were available on multiple platforms, it's kind of like, okay, well, they all do the same. And I think now the fact that these companies are able to kind of control their rights, they're not dependent on a third-party company, I think we're just going to kind of see them getting a little isolationist and grabbing their content and putting it behind a paywall and saying, hey, you don't need Netflix to watch this. We have this. We own this. This is where you'll get it. And I think we'll start to see that through all the networks and companies pretty soon.
You both kind of talked about how this is going to be the last one that can come in and really grab people's dollars. And part of that is I've read research in a couple of different articles that have said that most people have considered 3 streaming services as their max. You know, I can pay $11 for Hulu or $12 for Netflix and maybe HBO Go. And I think Disney comes in and automatically, they have the low price point at $6.99, but they're automatically going to be one that people are like, okay, that's one of my 3. I have to have that as one of my 3. There are too many movies that we've talked about in their catalog. So I think Disney Plus, no matter what, is going to be a success. I just wonder if the internal conversation around like, okay, we want this many subscribers based off the launch. We want to see that this many people watched The Mandalorian in the first month to tell us that this was the right way to go forward. Because that will then dictate, all right, we're going to take that data and say we'll make more shows like this, that the way Netflix determines the next version of the show that they're going to create.
Yeah, are they going are they going for success or dominance?
something that is I guess encouraging maybe is that, you know, the Mandalorian is a smart subject and title and like area for them to work for a number of reasons. One, you know, it's a little smaller scale. It doesn't feel like it needs to be the full-on epic that you expect from a Star Wars movie. The other thing is that while we've seen some mixed response to these continued saga movies, and maybe we've seen a little bit of concern whenever Solo underperformed at the box office, the one thing that seems like oddly, like Rogue One and Solo both seemed to be movies that played relatively safely with fans. Like people who are big fans of the new saga movies tend to like them okay. and people who are fans of the old movies and really hate the new stuff tend to like them okay. And I don't know, when you go Rogue One to Solo to then the Mandalorian TV series, it does seem like it's kind of playing in that sandbox.
Sure.
So you're working with some a character who at least iconographically, like physically, is familiar,
and he's a fan favorite. Also,
it's kind of this fan favorite. Again, I know we're not talking specifically about Boba Fett, but it's like he's a Boba Fett, and you're dealing with these like smugglers and scoundrels, which has always been a place that I don't know. It's a little easier to write that stuff well. Like it's a little more archetypical. It's a little bit more tropey. Whereas I think with the new movies, they're really trying to step outside of tropes, and they are trying to be a little more different. So, maybe that's encouraging. Maybe it bodes well that, it's a little bit less of a risk. Obviously it's a huge financial quote unquote risk, but they chose maybe safer content. But I'm still, I don't say that like, oh, it's going to be boring. I'm excited for this, and especially like any of that leaked footage, any of the stuff we saw. I mean, it looks like it's going to be visually cool. I know Ryan's not here to dunk on Favreau, but like I like Favreau, so I'm excited.
That's where I was headed to wrap up this entire segment. Was a nice dunk on Mr. Favreau, because that everyone is heading to the multiplex this weekend to see Favreau's beautiful Lion King. No one is drawn in by Beyonce. It's the name Favreau.
He's Favreau. He's bringing it in. Do you know what? I honestly forgot that he directed that thing. Wow, I thought he was just a producer.
Of Zathura and Cowboys and Aliens comes Lion King.
I mean, he's got the effects down, so that's what happens when Favreau has the whole Lucasfilm shop at his disposal. He's like, just go, make these lions real.
What kind of coin do you think he has for the Lion King? I should have saved this for when Ryan's on the pod.
Yeah, we'll ask Ryan.
So let's move on to one other thing I would want to say is that, Chris, you did bring up the Resistance Emmy nomination. Very exciting for the Resistance to get that. I don't think that neither one of you have finished the first season, correct?
Correct.
At the end of the first season, for those of you who have watched it, I felt like the show started getting into a storyline that felt new to me in the Star Wars universe, which was a character named Tam who is friends with Kaz, works on the same crew as Kaz, feels betrayed by Kaz as well as other members of Kaz's team who have worked together for what she deems to be the Resistance, and she feels like order is the right way to go, that the First Order is doing things the right way.
Sure.
And so the First Order then manipulates her to see her friends as dissenters who are causing problems rather than just following the rule of law. I won't spoil the decisions she makes in the end, but she's presented with a choice. Do I stay with my friends who I think are flying in the face of what keeps us safe, or do I go with the First Order, which is going to potentially give me many more opportunities and continue to run things the way I think they need to be run? Now, that's almost like tipping the scales from, and I kind of wonder, and I don't know if they were inspired by the idea of how do you find someone who becomes an extremist. But
I think the
idea that like there's this choice and there's a part where someone is potentially just their normal good self, but then because of actions that are construed in a certain way to them, they then find themselves in a path that leads them closer to bad choices and evil. I guess we've seen that before.
Yes, I think that's a great message for young people today. I think. And then you do kind of have to think about it. It is kind of examining a little more, like the idea of rebels in society is generally not thought to be the best thing. And I think in our country, it is a little bit romanticized for sure. But I think in Star Wars, it's often glossed over. It's like they're always the heroes, but then it's kind of like at great cost, they have to be the heroes.
And it's easy. Yeah. It's easy to think of the galaxy as everyone's like, oh, yeah, thank goodness for the rebellion. I love Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Princess Leia. They're going to save us. But to have someone who doesn't necessarily get the full picture, which is what majority of people just trying to get by every day in the galaxy, they wouldn't have the full picture, and they could be seen in different ways.
It's really good to see. It's pretty refreshing to see a Star Wars story challenge in that way.
So I would recommend check it out if you've not finished season 1 of The Resistance. I mean, you could potentially pick it up about 3 or 4 episodes before the end of the first season and watch it from there. But I do think that they did a really phenomenal job, and congrats and kudos to all of them on the Emmy nomination. So let's open up our pocketbook, talk a little bit about some action figures. And I know, Sam, this was near and dear to your heart, conversation about how much we're going to take out of the pocketbook when we want to buy something.
Well, I did want to bring this up this week. We've talked a lot in recent episodes about, Galaxy's Edge is coming, right? And we know we're going to be spending a lot on memorabilia and everything. I can't remember if I've talked about it on the pod or just offline to you guys, but I had a bit of a spell in the fall where I sort of went a little action figure crazy. I picked up a few things. I picked up some really cool NECA, Ninja Turtles. They're these 7-inch turtles from the 1991 movie.
Thanks for putting me out of that in my pocketbook as well, Sam. You showed me it, and I had to go buy it.
Absolutely, you are welcome. And so I'm curious. Let's stick to the franchise. Let's stick to Star Wars.
Sure.
How much? And I want to stick to specifically action figures. And I think we can talk the sort of 2 ranges, right? You can talk the sort of 5 to 7 inch scale, or we can go up to the 1/6 scale, that 12-inch scale. But for each of you guys,
you mean like the Falcon scale?
What would you?
Wait, but so is this?
It's a Han Solo figure that's 19 feet tall.
He's like Ant-Man big.
This includes a Sideshow collectible, which is like kind of an action figure because it is posable?
I think it could be, and I think we can differentiate. But what's a reasonable amount for you guys? What would you either if there's a Holy Grail figure you want?
Yeah.
You can name it and what you'd pay for it. I'm just curious.
Wow.
You can kind of skin this cat however you want.
Yeah.
I will mention one that I've been looking at really recently. There's a very cool SH Figuarts, very posable, pretty detailed. I think it's the 6-inch scale. Luke from Return of the Jedi, like black outfit Luke. And it's, I don't know, it looked like on Amazon it was running around the sort of $150 to $160 mark, right? Okay. And that's a 6-inch. That's a small figure, but they're super well painted, good detail, lots of comes with a lot of accessories, accoutrement. And that's something I haven't pulled the trigger on, but that's kind of the one on my list right now.
Yeah, I think if we do this, I got to break it into 2 kind of categories because
sure.
I have 2 price points. So there's the slideshow realm, and I'll just throw out a blatant number. I think if it's really cool and it represents a scene or something that I love, I think I'd be willing to plunk down, let's say $300, and that's a treat. That's it's got to be.
That's not your monthly spend.
It's not my monthly spend. It's got to be the scene that I love the most of Star Wars. And and my brother and I, we found this in the we got the Bespin Luke and we got the X-Wing Luke. So it came with 2 of them, so there's value added there. But it had the whole set of Luke with his arm off. You can hang him on the little antenna thing.
I remember that one.
It's beautiful. And so that that nailed the scene that I thought, yeah, we got to have this. This is an iconic moment from the movie. So for the slideshows and kind of the newer collectibles, that would be my range. Anything more than that, it's getting to the point where I don't want to take it out of the box or look at it. It's kind of scary. I think so. The other side of that coin is vintage toys, like figures and things like that.
Sure. Yeah.
And I would say I got the last real actual vintage collectible I got, other than just when I was younger and bought prequel stuff, was I found a Lando figure from Empire Strikes Back in pretty good condition. I wouldn't call it mint or anything. It's not graded, but it's in some kind of casing. And I think I paid $70 for that. And this was maybe 10 years ago. So that's probably my like, and that again, that's like this is Lando. I found a Lando in a box. So I like got that. So I think those are my two numbers. But again, those are like, that's the
Special
max.
cake. Those are birthday cake. Those
Exactly.
are birthday cake figures.
That's the max. I know it could go anywhere though.
Mike, do you have anything on the radar? Or?
Yeah, I'm very much in line with Chris. I would say I've spent between $200 and $250 on a couple of Sideshow collectibles, an R2, a C-3PO, and a Yoda. I think the Yoda was more like $150 because Yoda being a bit smaller doesn't quite cost as much.
Can't justify that plastic.
Yeah. So those would be, that's the high end of what I would pay for any kind of collectible figure at this point in terms of a realistic purchase. I mentioned it on the last podcast or maybe two before that I've always wanted a full-size R2-D2. I don't think this really qualifies as an action figure. Well, so, obviously there's a $25K at Galaxy's Edge. I'm not spending that. But on Sideshow, I believe they have a 1-to-1 scale that's somewhere in the 7,000 or 8,000 range.
Ooh,
wow. I don't think I would never be able to rationalize spending that. But I see it every time, and I'm just like, ooh, that's very attractive to me. But
it's tempting.
But I actually, the other thing that I would say that I have been
That's like a really nice used car.
Hey, R2-D2. That kind of counts.
It's kind of what R2-D2 is. Yeah.
But I actually have been eyeing, there's been two that I've really been interested in, and it's been a Kylo Ren from Sideshow Collectibles with the helmet on, because I think that they're fantastic with what they do, but I never feel like the faces are quite right. They just...
Sure.
There's always something, maybe it's the uncanny valley. They just don't look quite enough like the actual actor. And then I do want a Captain America as well, because I think a Captain America probably I would prefer Captain America from Winter Soldier, but I believe those don't sell anymore. They kind of have a limited time period on it. And then I probably wouldn't have any problem spending anywhere from $20 to $50 on some sort of Black Series figure, an older figure as well. If I really felt like it represented, like I've spent money on Power of the Force stuff from the 90s, going back and finding ones that was like Luke in the Rebel pilot outfit, just wanting that again because I had it as a kid. Yeah. And for some reason, when I was in high school, I said, I don't need these anymore. Let me ship them off to my cousins. What was I thinking? Because, of course, I should have at least pulled out 10 of those to hold on to myself. You did, I believe, both of you saw the 5 or 6 figures I still have in the packaging that are worth nothing, but I still love them.
That's great. Yeah, sentimental value.
But I really, there's a cap for me around that range. And actually, now that I look at it, Sideshow Collectibles 1/6 scale R2-D2, which I have, which I love, is currently only listed at $160. I think when I bought it, it was at least $225. So get out there and get it, people.
There you go.
Let me ask you about one. You both brought up the idea of vintage figures. Now, I think you're probably both familiar as fans. There is a method of my madness, and we're getting to it right now. You're probably both familiar with a specific figure that has been, for many Star Wars fans, with big pocketbooks, something of a holy grail.
Oh. You have a Dax figure?
Do either of you know? Do either of you know what I'm talking about? Any guesses?
Is it the blue alien?
I was going to say the Boba Fett.
Ding ding ding! Mike's got it
with the rocket.
The Boba Fett. The Boba Fett with the rocket, and specifically one recently went for sale, and it was the prototype. So it's all blue-gray plastic. It has the working firing rocket, and it recently went up for auction and sold on July 11th. Now, what would you guys each? I want you to first tell me what you would pay for that, and then I want you to tell me what you think it went for. What you think it went for?
Wow.
I'm actually going to be surprising and say I don't think I would pay very much for it because it doesn't hold the memory for me because I didn't play with that type of Star Wars figure growing up. I know they're amazing. I know that people have collected those forever, but my memory of Star Wars toys is the Power of the Force line in the 90s, and so I wouldn't pay a ton, but my guess would be $300,000.
I would pay $100,000, and my guess is going to be, I'm going to say $1.2 million.
Whoa,
Chris. Oh, this is funny, you guys. So first of all, Chris, you wouldn't pay $100,000.
No, I don't have $100,000.
All right. So recently at Hake's Auction House in York, PA. So interesting, close to where I grew up.
Interesting. So
the
close
auction
to greatness.
house, it recently sold July 11th. The Boba Fett had a winning bid of $112,926.
I wouldn't have got it.
Chris would have been about $13K shy with his bid.
Dang. Wow.
The last auction record for a Star Wars action figure was $86,000.
Oh. Wow.
Also at a Hake's auction, which I guess Hake's is like a big auction house in
Must
North
be.
PA. But I thought this was funny because it also came up in the. I think this might have been like a somewhat targeted news story because it's from reported by Fox 43, which was like my local Fox affiliate when I grew up as a kid. so I was like, oh, interesting, Fox 43 covering this Boba Fett. So yeah, I mean, hey, if you think it's worth $1.2 million, I think I know a guy who would sell you one.
You'd be like, yeah, that's about how much it's worth. Yeah.
Yeah, they estimated its value would be between $75K and $100K, and it went for just under 113. So I thought that was interesting. I thought it would be interesting to think about what we'd all pay. Obviously, we are not collectors, and we are not. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for you guys, but I'm not liquid enough for that kind of purchase right now.
No, I think you save that for a down payment on something.
Yeah, no. The only the only liquid that I have is me peeing my pants at how much that costs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I tried to button that one up, but it squeaked through. That's a hot and fresh.
It's a hot and gross.
Well, speaking of Chris peeing his pants, we want to get him to Galaxy's Edge, people. And if we get Chris to Galaxy's Edge, who knows what could happen. So we speak about spending lots of money. Chris is a little reticent to go to Galaxy's Edge because he's got some sort of busy schedule, I guess. What we want from all of our listeners is we're going to tweet in the next few days about Chris going to Galaxy's Edge, and we need your help. If we get to 200 retweets, Chris has guaranteed that he will go to Galaxy's Edge. Sam and Ryan, of course, are welcome to go as well, but
This is true.
We need Chris a little extra motivation from the fans.
Now, Mike,
I need the fans to tell me.
Mike, remind me that must cost someone to retweet. That must cost $5 or $10, right?
Oh, you'd be surprised, Sam. It's really nothing at a cost at all to a single follower to do this.
You're telling me I could force Chris to go somewhere and travel for free?
You could use the Force, Sam.
Guys, just retweet it.
Just do it. Just do it.
We're
Get
gonna
Chris
have
to
something
go.
up. I also want to jump in. We've been neglecting our duties. And
What's up?
We've made a big faux pas here.
Uh-oh.
Look out.
On June 11th,
Oh.
back before June 11th, we launched a little contest, the first of 2 contests, and we gave a secret word. And we asked somebody to write in a secret word to win one of Marco Manev's prints that Chris has. Guys, we had a submission and we never even dealt with it. Tom, you emailed us on June 11th. You're the winner. You get the poster. We're going to reach out from the Droids Pod Gmail with some exciting news and our sincerest of apologies for the delay because it's over a month ago. But hey, man, new poster coming your way. Get excited.
Boom.
There's one other out there. If anybody wants to go and listen to our last Outpost, that is the sort of spoiler special we did on Far From Home. There is another secret word that you can uncover in there. And Chris, that's for another poster, right?
Yep, that'll be for a Simpsons poster. It's kind of got the lard lad in it. It's a pretty neat looking poster.
So join Tom. Be cool like Tom and get the secret word out to us.
You also had to have seen Spider-Man Far From Home now, we're realizing. So there's a requirement. Unless you like spoilers or don't care.
No
just
no purchase necessary except for a ticket to Far From Home or
there you go.
It'll be spoiled for you.
There you go.
I mean, you could have read a summary online. You didn't need to see it. So, to each their own.
What a thrilling way to get my movies.
Well, Well, that's pretty much going to wrap it up here for this edition of the pod. I will say we didn't mention Galaxy's Edge Rise of the Resistance is opening December 5th at Disney World and January 17th at Disneyland. So Disneyland got the first opening of the park, but Disney World will have the first chance to ride what is billed to be the top attraction of Galaxy's Edge. So for those of you who've been waiting for that, you can go in December. Chris will be joining myself. That 200 retweet mark does require Chris to go for 4 days and spend many hours in Oga's Cantina. So
I love it.
Just keep that in mind when you're getting the retweets out there. Twitter, Droids Pod, look for it there. Instagram, Droids Pod. Facebook, The Droids Podcast. Gmail, droidspod@gmail.com. Send in the secret word and win a poster. Also, let us know how much you would pay or how much you have paid for a Star Wars action figure in your lifetime, and we will share it on the show. Rate and review us on iTunes. Let people know about the show. We'll play any voicemails you send our way. We're open to anything. Just send it in. We're good. That will do it for the droids you're looking for, a Star Wars podcast.
What they
Annie?
Hey, you boys want to pay $1.5 million to go to medieval times on the Millennial Falcon?